Today, Sunshine Network takes you to the Florida's First Ladies Symposium, held recently at the Museum of Florida History in Tallahassee. Never before in Florida history have so many First Ladies convened to share and document their experiences as political partners. 5 former First Ladies and current First Lady Columba Bush participated in the seminar. The event also attracted 3 past governors of Florida, along with many family members. The forum was held in conjunction with National Women's History Month and Florida's First Families exhibit in the State Museum. Sunshine Network will bring you highlights from this historic symposium in just a few minutes. But first, a closer look at the First Families exhibit and a talk with the program's main organizer, Dr. Patricia Clements.
I had the opportunity to interview each of the First Ladies individually when I collected their gowns in conjunction with the exhibit. And we have a video entitled Political Partners, Florida's First Ladies. And through that video, I really learned a tremendous amount about the First Ladies' contributions and public service to the state. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could learn about their contributions and the work they've done and the difference they've made, not just for their husbands, but for the people of Florida. The gowns are a cornerstone of the exhibit, and there's memorabilia from many, many administrations. There's campaign memorabilia, there are other clothing artifacts, there are letters, there are documents, just furniture as well. Just a history and a compilation of many personal and political aspects of the First Family's lives. I love a letter that Claude Kirk, Governor Kirk, wrote to Mrs. Kirk when he was courting her. It's included. It's one of my favorite pieces because it tells about the political history of the campaign as well as his great affection for her. I'd like to say that I want to see this to be an ongoing project. I'd love to continue to work and be able to show the people of Florida what the First Families have done for them, in particular the First Ladies. Because I think we're all aware, it's public record what our governors have done, and the legislation they've passed obviously is recorded. But I'd like to preserve the history of the other people who have worked hard and haven't, I don't want to say haven't been recognized, but perhaps their work hasn't been recorded and documented as well.
Secretary of State Katherine Harris presented some of the evening's opening remarks.
Good evening. What an exciting time. I can say that thus far in my official capacity, either as Senator or Secretary of State, I don't know that I've ever been more honored or pleased or really humbled to sit in the presence of such extraordinary women who have really helped to make Florida history. Thank you so much for all you've done. It's really a great evening tonight. So let's give a very warm welcome to all of our First Ladies in the forum. We're so very, very pleased this could take place tonight. And Patricia, on a personal note, I want to thank you so much and thank the former Secretary Mortham as well. I'm so pleased this could happen, and I can't take any credit because it didn't happen in my administration, but I'm so glad the fruits of her labor and yours are here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Harris, for your introduction. As moderator, I'd like to state the primary purpose of our forum, and that is to interpret Florida's history through first-person accounts of Florida's political partners. These women here tonight are independent historical agents who have contributed to shaping Florida's political history through the contributions they have made to Florida in the roles they have chosen while serving us as their First Ladies. I would like first, before we begin our forum, to have each First Lady give a brief personal remark about her background. We'll start with Mrs. Mixon.
I grew up in a small town in Jackson County, Graceville, named for my family, and I met Wayne when I was 14 and he was 19. And we dated for 5 years until we were finally old enough to get married. I came from a family of teachers, and I became a teacher. I taught 30 years English in high schools and junior college, and just fortunately, the year that was my 30th year of teaching was the year he was elected lieutenant governor, and so I could retire and come over and join all the fun.
you?
My family came from Indiana and came to Florida, my mother and father, in the mid-20s, 1920s. And they lived in Orlando, and I came along, and I grew up in Sanford, Florida. And I was growing up during the time of the Second World War, and I had a background in church and youth activities. And I think the spirit that we had of developing patriotism during that Second World War played a very influential part in my thinking all the rest of my life. And because of that, being a part of government has meant a great deal to me, because I grew up thinking you should do what you can to serve or to help in any way that you can. And I became a teacher, taught elementary school off and on for about 5 years, and married my husband in 1956. And we spent the first year, it was like a courtship, because we didn't get to spend too much time together prior to our being married. In the second year, he decided he would run for the legislature. And that's how our legislative life began, and from there it hasn't stopped.
Thank you. Mrs. Graham?
Well, I was born in South Florida. My daddy was born in Beirut, Lebanon, and immigrated to Georgia. And I tell everyone I get my southern accent from Beirut. My mother was from Ohio, and I was raised in Miami Shores. Knew Bob almost all my life. We were christened in the same church when we were little. We grew up going to different high schools, but started dating at the University of Florida. Got married my junior year. His senior year went off to Boston to law school. I graduated from Boston University and then taught school up there, taught history and English. Then we came back and started our legislative and public service days. I have 4 daughters and 9 grandchildren.
Well, I was born in Mexico 45 years ago. I met Jeb, my husband, when I was 16 and he was 17. He was teaching Spanish and English in Mexico. We've been married for 25 years. We have 3 children, 22, 21, and 15. And I'm just very happy to be in Tallahassee. And, you know, my background has been politics, you know, because since Jeb worked for his father in 1979, we've been campaigning almost every other 2 years. So you can imagine, I can tell you a lot about campaigning.
Thank you. Mrs. Martinez?
I am Mary Jane Marino Martinez, born and reared in Tampa, Florida. My grandparents were immigrants and came at the turn of the century from Sicily. Bob and I became acquainted when we were in the same homeroom in high school back in 1953. We graduated from high school and were married a year later, 1954. We were both 19 and so much in love, and I think I ruined his baseball professional career, which I hope he's forgiven me for. But we took turns going to college. He went first, and I think we were a little bit ahead of our time, because then when he finished school, then I decided to go to the University of South Florida as a charter member back in 1960. And at that time, our daughter was a year and a half old. So he learned to be a good chef. He was a great babysitter and helped me type all of my papers. So 6 years later, I graduated from the University of South Florida. And it's been a whirlwind with him ever since. And I don't expect it to change. We've had a wonderful life together. We've been married 44 years. And for some of you that may want to know, our Basset Hound mascot is still alive. He was 15 years old yesterday. And yes, we are going to have a birthday party for him.
Thank you. Mrs. Collins?
Well, I hesitate to say I was born in New York because everyone... And I didn't know what a Yankee was, but I remember my uncle called me the little Yankee in the family, and I didn't especially like it. I didn't know what it meant, but we moved to Florida quite early, and when I was just a baby, and I have lived there, and I have lived in Tallahassee all my life, and I feel like that I've really had a little bit of an easy time in moving to the governor's mansion because I lived just a block away, and I was shocked to realize, I was looking today at the number of governors' wives I have known, and it's sort of horrifying. I'm not saying how old I am, because I really remember, and it's shocking to think so, but I remember when Sidney J. Katz had his parade because it had to go in front of my grandmother's house, which was Monroe Street, the only paved street in Tallahassee. And it impressed me because they had Katz, and he was on his car, an open Ford car, and I think I was 6 years old, but don't figure how old that makes me now. But it was interesting because we were just a block away from the mansion, and then when, I guess it was when the Hardys were there, I knew Governor Hardy because he would walk by my grandmother's house and turn the jump rope for me to jump rope. And then the sidewalk in front of the governor's mansion was the smoothest in town, and all the children would skate in front of the governor's mansion. So that was very nice, and I felt very familiar with the sidewalk. But I'm a Floridian from way back, and Roy and I met very early, and I'd known him all his life, but I didn't pay much attention to him. He was 3 years older than I was, and that was an older boy. So my mother didn't let me have anything to do with older boys. So I had to be in college before I really paid much attention to him or he to me. But he was interested in politics always and ran for prosecuting attorney, and he was defeated in his first race, but he said that if he won, we'd get married. And as luck had it, he didn't win, but we did get married, and it was sort of strange because when we got if all the people that had been so anxious to help Roy, and if all of us that had worked hard in his campaign could have been voters, we were not old enough to vote, he would have been elected, because he would have been elected. But anyway, we've had a very happy time in Tallahassee, and we've always lived just a block away from the governor's mansion. So when we moved into the governor's mansion the first time, we moved into the mansion, lived there 6 months. Then Royce was, Dan McCarty had died in office, and so we ran for his unexpired term. And we lived in the old governor's mansion for 6 months, and then we moved back to our own house and lived there 2 years, and then moved back into the new governor's mansion. So rather strange background, but I look at all these governors' wives, and they look like my children. I'm proud of them.
Sunshine Network returns with more of Florida's First Ladies right after this. Questions to each of the First Ladies in attendance centered around several main topics, which they would each, in turn, be asked to address. We now present highlights from their answers.
Mrs. Graham, how did you in 1979 define your role as First Lady?
Well, after just hearing Mrs. Collins speak, I will say that she has always been my inspiration and my First Lady. And that was such a nice wonderful feeling to have you as our neighbor and to know we could always count on you. But you know, no single person has the answer. We all learn and we all have to decide with our husbands and our families as to what is good for us and what would be a good service. But I will say, Trish, that there's no better opportunity for service in Florida than to be First Lady, because the doors just fly open for you and people want you to help and people want you to be a part. So I think the First Lady with her husband and family makes that determination. No one has the answer. And it's just an ongoing process as to what you wish to do and how you can affect change.
I actually went to about 5 different states and talked to Democratic committee groups. I went to retirement communities. Now I'm living in one myself. And daycare centers for elderly people. I talked on radio programs and some television interviews, and then joined my husband whenever and did the same kind of thing with him. And I feel like that really gave me a lot of confidence in doing something like that, even though it was very difficult for me because it made me so nervous. I'd forget what I was supposed to say. And the real problem was you were always on a time limit. They would say you have 5 minutes to give your spiel, or 10 minutes, and you had to give all the background you could about your husband in that length of time. And I didn't want to talk about issues, because when you talk about issues, you have to word what you say very carefully. And every time I thought I had all the words in place, then my husband would decide to say it a different way. I decided it would be safer all the way around, and I would cause less of a problem if I just stayed away from the issues.
Mrs. Nixon, I know you have some incredibly humorous stories. Would you share one of them with us?
You only remember the funny things, I think. But our first campaign was the most exciting because it was a very big field running for governor, and Wayne and Bob were just,